So let's start with HS2. That is the planned new high-speed railway line. The idea, the first phase from London to Birmingham, the second phase from the West Midlands to Crewe to Manchester and the West Midlands to Leeds. Today, the Transport Secretary Grant Shapps has met the West Midlands Mayor, Conservative Andy Street, who says HS2 is an absolutely critical way of levelling the Midlands and the North with London. So let's ask our panel, should it stay or should it go? I'm going to start with you, Fraser, because you've written about this. Let's have a look at your headline there in the Telegraph. Hopelessly out of date and ruinously expensive. Tory knives are out for HS2. You want it to go.
I think it's the most monumental waste of money. I mean, transport does need to be improved. Everybody knows that. But do you need to spend £100 billion on a project that's going to make it a little bit faster to go from London to Birmingham? So what I think is going to happen is, by the way, it's difficult to find many Tories enthusiastic about this. The average Tory backbencher would tell you it was a George Osborne vanity project, so he could talk about being a builder. The bill would come in way after he'd have left the Treasury. And if you look at the cost-to-benefit analysis, the latest independent analysis is that would be 60p of benefit for every pound spent. It's a massive, therefore, waste of money. But bits of it still make sense. The bits north of Birmingham obviously need to be upgraded. But the line from London to Birmingham, that's what, 75 minutes? It's fine. So I think what will happen is that the Tories will do a version of HS2 that might not say they're abandoning it. It might be a mutation. And you'll get the northern connections built, but London, that aspect will be on the back burner.
Jason, what do you think?
Fraser's right, there's an urgent need for upgrading. But the point on HS2 is not just about speed, it's about capacity. These are wider trains, more frequent trains. But I think, you know, the big problem with HS2 has been it's the only thing we're building, which is why it's become such a totem debate. If we were building trains, more links to Cornwall, Leeds, Manchester, Newcastle, people wouldn't feel so aggrieved that there was this shed loads of money going to the London-Birmingham line. But I do support the need for it because, you know, I went to see the Midlands Industrial Council in May, huge Tory supporters, huge supporters of the project because it's the capacity. You know, I think it can take up to 31,000 people a day, which is way up from the current capacity.
Should it stay or go, Rania?
I think fundamentally we need investment in public transport, and I think when we look at this from an environmental perspective, we need good public transport that's affordable, that people can use so they don't use cars, and I think that should be the priority. In terms of whether HS2 should go or stay, I think we need investment in the North, we need investment in the Midlands, and it's a question of whether HS2 is working and whether the money that's been spent on it is being used effectively. That's a question for the government to decide, but I think at the end of the day we need investment, and that needs to be at the forefront of any discussion.
Where are we with this project, Kate? Because as Fraser mentioned, it was the brainchild of George Osborne. We are talking about dates into the future for completion, aren't we?
Yeah, I mean, it goes further back than George Osborne. So we've really been talking about this for over a 12-year period of time, which, you're right, has focused minds a lot because it just doesn't seem to be moving forward very far. I mean, at the heart of it, initial costs were 33 billion. We're now looking at something close to 100 billion. So that is just staggering in terms of cost. But I think the most important thing is to really listen to what northern civic leaders are saying. They have wanted this. They really do think it will improve links. They do think a faster line down to London is important, and of course they want better connectivity across the north with the Northern Powerhouse Rail line as well. They want both of those things. But I think when you've got so many northern leaders who are experts on their local economies saying we really want it, then I think we must listen and know that something has to be done to try and improve connectivity in the way they imagine.
Let's go to Joe Rukin because he's campaign manager of Stop HS2. He is from Warwickshire. Why are you against it, Joe?
Well, HS2 is a monument to policy which is basically made on the fly by people who have a vested interest in lobbying for something that's going to be built. You know, there was never an assessment of what's best for Britain's transport infrastructure. It was just HS2. That's the project with the construction industry want building. There's a lot of vested interest in making money out of the land around the stations, and the arguments for it have just been bolted on afterwards. Like this idea that it's going to be this magic wand to cure the north-south divide ignores every single piece of international evidence, and indeed the evidence of our own hub and spoke transport system that's just dragged more stuff to London. But that's the problem with HS2. A lot of the arguments are counterfactual. But, you know, for example, one of the things that's been put through recently is it's going to be needed to meet net zero targets. Well, actually, HS2's own assessment show the project being a net contributor of greenhouse gases 120 years into the future. But this is the thing, that if there are any criticisms of HS2, it is simply, fingers in the ears time. Like this week, the Wildlife Trust, for example, highlighted that almost 700 wildlife sites were affected by HS2, and 33 SSIs opposed to the 15 that HS2 Limited say.
All right.
And HS2 just reply and say, this is inaccurate and misleading because, we know more about wildlife than the Wildlife Trust do.
All right.
And that's been the argument for putting up HS2 so far. It's bombastic rhetoric.
Let me put some of this to the panel. Stay with us for the moment, Joe. I mean, Jason, listening to that, obviously that is a vociferous argument against. Has there been a sense of NIMBYism, though, in this too? People just don't want it going through their backyard when it may not actually benefit them.
Yeah, I think people who are beneficiaries of really good transport don't see the need for urgent transport upgrades. I think is the case. But I think it's undoubted that we need a huge infrastructure revolution in this country. It's clear that the Chancellor and the Prime Minister support that. We need to, we've taken too long to debate some of these issues. We just need to get on and build it. Other countries build things far quicker than we do, far cheaper than we do. We need to get a grip of these projects and get on with them.
Is it going to bite the dust, though?
Yes, I think it's dead in the water right now.
Do you?
Yeah, I mean, you can't have something trebling its cost and politicians still defending it because it's somebody else's mistake. There are so many better ways of spending that money, so many better ways. And now, for example, we're talking about Northern Powerhouse Rail, Leeds to Manchester. That makes a lot more sense than trying to improve this. And also, there's an incredible London-centric view of this, that to help the Northerners, let them come to London a little bit faster.
But the Northerners, as you call them, are in favour of this.
The Northern Councils are. If you look at the public opinion, it's 2-1 against HS2.
How can Boris Johnson talk about improving and increasing connectivity, putting that at the heart of his premiership, wanting to join up parts of the North and the Midlands, and then, at the same time, do a complete U-turn? We heard him saying he supports HS2, and now perhaps dropping it?
Well, I don't think he can drop it. Politically, I really don't think he can. He's got all of these MPs that he's won over, and he's also got voters in the North in seats he's not ever held before. So to turn around and to do this now would be a huge kind of slap in the face, I think, for all of those new people that have come on board and come around to Conservatives. I think, as you mentioned in your column, I think you say that the London to Birmingham element, that's actually not as important because the connectivity is actually pretty good there. So it is the stations beyond that, and I think, Northern Powerhouse Rail is probably the most important thing. But I have spoken to people last night about this, and if you don't have a quick line down to London, it does really affect people. But when we're talking about 15 minutes here and there, I think that Birmingham to London link, they could run the slower trains on it, and the cost can come down a little bit.
When you're right about a lot of MPs being upset, but now is the time to upset your MPs. Boris Johnson will never be more personally powerful. He's just won an election, his cabinet are all sycophantic, the opposition are in a mess. If you're going to make a very difficult decision, then right now is the time to make it. So that's why I think, and also, by the way, since then, there's so much investment now being promised of the North that wasn't on the menu 5 or 6 years ago. I don't think your average Northern voter, who probably wouldn't be spending out lots of money coming to London, is going to be that upset by losing something they were probably never going to use much in the first place.
But it's not just about the time, it's about the capacity.
Yeah.
The trains we have are old, narrow trains. That is one of the big problems as well. It's capacity, it's frequency. That, HS2 lays the groundwork for a lot of that across the country.
What would be the price politically, though? Those new MPs in the North and Midlands that are, they've gone Conservative, and the idea that he might drop it. How would that go down?
I think the price politically is more immediate with the West Midlands election in May. Andy Street is the mayor of the West Midlands, Conservative mayor, who won by a very small, got a very small majority in 2017. If you scrap HS2, in the next couple of months, the election is in May. It's very, very difficult to regain people's trust in time for that election. You could be losing what is sort of a flagship mayoralty. It's a very fine,
Andy
narrow
Street's
election.
intervened publicly
Yeah.
about this, which just shows how worried he is and how important it is. He really thinks that this is actually an election-winning thing for him.
Yeah,
So.
and he's a relatively independent mayor.
Yeah, it'd be a huge slap in the face for him. And if HS2 survives, this will be the main political consideration against it. But if you're just going to abolish it further down the line, then why waste time? Why not take the hit now?